My name is Claire Whitmore, and at the last family dinner I ever attended, I sat exactly where I always did, at the far end of the table beneath the chandelier, in a seat that might as well have been empty. Sophie was bragging about her latest real estate deal. Ryan was raising a glass over a courtroom win, and my mother. She watched them both with the kind of pride I'd long stopped expecting for myself. No one asked where I worked. No one noticed when I poured a glass of Bordeaux. The good kind. The kind they'd never taste because it came from me. I was used to it. Years of it. Sitting in that same chair, counting the same silences, hearing the same backhanded compliments. Passion projects, they called my work. Hobbies. But what they didn't know was that while they measured success in headlines and handshakes, I measured it in signatures. Quiet ones. Strategic ones. That night, as my mother raised her glass and said, "I just hope you find your calling someday," I looked her in the eye and answered, "The call's coming Monday morning." She didn't understand what I meant. None of them did. Not until Monday at 9 a.m., when the boardroom lights dimmed, the agenda screen lit up, and they saw my name where they'd never expected it. Chairwoman. Majority control. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there to reclaim what had been quietly mine all along. Before I tell you how that moment really unfolded, if you've ever felt invisible at your own table, erased from the family story like you were never meant to be part of it, leave a comment below. You're not the only one. And trust me, there's a way back in. I smoothed the edge of my linen napkin as the chandelier above shimmered against the crystal glasses. The same chandelier that had loomed over every Whitmore holiday, every forced celebration, every annual review of who had made the family proud and who had not. My seat, always at the far end, faced the antique mirror. I'd grown used to watching my reflection more than my relatives. At least she looked back. Mom's voice hadn't changed. Sharp, polished, just slightly condescending, like a judge who already had the verdict in mind. But something in the air had shifted. Not that she noticed. She never did. Sophie was already bragging about the investor from Miami who flew her to Biscayne Bay just to see her new property pitch. He said he hadn't seen a pitch deck that clean in 10 years, she said, tucking a lock of too perfect blonde hair behind one ear. Her diamond studs sparkled even when she lied. 10 years? Mom gasped. Darling, that's phenomenal. She beamed at Sophie like she'd just cured cancer. Your father would be so proud. Next to her, Ryan raised his wine glass like a trophy. We're finalizing that $30 million litigation this week. The opposing firm caved during deposition prep. Didn't even see the trap coming. You always were ruthless, Mom purred, like that was the highest compliment she could give a son. And strategic, Ryan added. Don't forget that. No one ever could, I muttered, but no one heard. I reached for the bottle of Bordeaux I'd brought, a 2006 Chateau Margaux, and poured myself a modest glass. No one commented. They never did. My taste in wine was as invisible as the degrees I earned or the jobs I held. This year, I hadn't even updated them on where I worked. Why bother? So, Ryan said, finally turning toward me. Claire, what are you up to these days? Still curating coloring books for toddlers at the museum? It's an exhibition on 17th century satirical engravings, I said calmly. But close. I love that you still care about hobbies, Sophie said sweetly, stabbing her asparagus like it had wronged her. Passion, Mom corrected. Claire's always had a passion project or two. She placed her hand lightly over her pearls, the same way she used to when delivering a death sentence. I just wish she'd channeled it into something measurable, quantifiable. Ryan chimed in, sipping. You mean profitable, I said. A small pause, not long, but enough to notice. I took out my phone, briefly glancing at the notification flashing at the top. One word glowed in red from the secure bank channel. Alert. Loan request submitted by Barbara Whitmore. Irregularities flagged. Review required. Underneath it, the number $3.8 million and a tag, Whitestone Tower, executive line. I tapped my screen off, slid the phone face down next to my plate. Ryan was now retelling, again, the story of how he caught a client hiding $11 million in crypto assets. The guy sobbed like a toddler once we revealed the evidence. Real grown man tears. They laughed. Even Mom chuckled behind her hand, like scandal was dessert. Sophie segued into a tangent about zoning laws in Coral Gables. Something about influencers wanting soundproof walls in their condos. I let the words roll over me, filling the room like fog. The kind that numbs. I had sat through so many of these nights I could recite their rhythms by heart. The rhythm of success measured in acquisition, applause, and attention. And in the background? Me. A relative cleared his throat to ask about stocks. Someone else mentioned tax season. Another toasted Ryan's audacity. Through it all, I kept my silence like a shield. Observing, cataloging, calculating. Mom raised her glass, her wrist flexing with practiced grace. She looked at me as if I were still 10, still hoping for her to be proud. I just hope you find your calling someday. The pause wasn't accidental. She wanted me to fill it with shame. Funny you say that, I said, lifting my glass to meet hers. The call's coming Monday morning. She blinked. I smiled. There was a shift then, subtle like a fault line creaking under porcelain. The table fell silent. Even Sophie stopped mid-scroll. No one asked what I meant. No one dared. I set my glass down. Not hard, not loud. Just enough. Thanks for dinner. Enjoy the weekend. You might need the rest? Rachel stood at the glass wall of my 42nd floor office, tablet in hand. We flagged at least 4 irregularities in the Whitmore Holdings file. Do we proceed? We execute, I said. The light beyond the window was sharp and colorless. Manhattan in surgical mode. Glass, steel, silence. Rachel didn't move until I did. She knew the choreography well by now. Decisions weren't made with emotion, only impact. The tablet lit up with cascading numbers. 4 irregularities was conservative. I'd already counted 7. 2 of them flagged by internal compliance and 1 that would raise interest at the IRS, if it got that far. But it wouldn't. Not if I moved first. I walked to the steel cabinet behind my desk and pressed my palm against the biometric lock. A soft beep, then the drawer slid open, revealing 3 unmarked dossiers. I pulled the one labeled Protocol Omega. The Greek letter printed in faint graphite ink, nearly invisible under the lights. This is the original Whitmore loan request, I said, laying the papers across the table. Filed late March. The declared assets include a beachside property in Sagaponack. Rachel scrolled through the digital record. That house was transferred to a shell corp last year, which was dissolved in January, I added, but not disclosed, which means that on March 22nd, my mother listed an asset she no longer owned, at least not officially. Rachel didn't blink. That was her gift. She never reacted. She just absorbed, processed, responded. She's not sloppy, I said. She's desperate. Wyatt's knock was punctual. 9:15 a.m. He entered with the calm of someone who had seen far worse, but understood when worse had teeth. I ran the back file audits you asked for, he said. There's a 2-year discrepancy in tax record submission. Her estate manager filed deferments under medical leave, but the name attached to the authorization doesn't exist. My fingers tapped the table once. Fabrication? Wyatt nodded. Synthetic ID. Slipped past state-level filters, but not ours. Collateral fraud, Rachel said softly. I signed the directive on the tablet. Mark this as Omega. Escalate classification to Tier 1. Rachel's hands moved quickly. The internal system switched to lockdown mode, then routed a board flag to 3 terminals. When the words Special Summons Initiated appeared, I saw the faintest flicker in her expression. Admiration, maybe, or dread. The line was always thin, A single memory slipped into view, like a scent you hadn't smelled in years. Wharton. Third year. Spring term. The award letter had come in a slim envelope, ironic considering the prize amount. The dean's note praised my financial algorithm as one of the most elegant applications of machine reasoning in portfolio prediction. I'd printed the letter and shown it to my mother that evening. She read it once, then folded it without looking up. "Who are you doing this for?" she asked. Not congratulations, not even interest. Just a question, an accusation in disguise. Now I answered her, not in words, but in actions. Rachel opened a fresh directive sheet. "I recommend we escalate to physical presence." "Agreed. Public summons are sealed. Sealed until confirmation." Her fingers flew. "Drafting now? Language?" I dictated slowly. "Board review scheduled. Applicant to be present in person. Full asset verification mandatory." The final word landed with weight. Not on paper, on consequence. Rachel tapped send. The document encrypted, flagged, and vanished into 3 layers of secure folders. She lowered the tablet. "She still thinks you work at a library archive?" she asked, deadpan. I smiled. "She'll soon realize the books I handle write destinies." We stood in silence for a moment, the kind of stillness only power can afford. A soft chime echoed from the wall terminal. Monday, 9 a.m., Whitestone Capital Review Board meeting, mandatory attendance confirmed. Mom walked into the boardroom like she owned it. By 9:07, she'd learned she never did. Her heels clicked across the marble floor in tight rhythm, crisp and confident. Ryan walked beside her with the smug slouch of a man who always wins settlements. Sophie followed like she was striding into a runway show instead of a financial tribunal. None of them noticed how the room was already tilting out of their control. The chairs were aligned in exact symmetry. The screen displayed a cold blue schematic. Not a PowerPoint, not a sales pitch, but a live feed diagram of Whitestone's global subsidiaries and financial web. A single name pulsed at the center. Claire Whitmore. Ryan narrowed his eyes. "This some kind of data visualization mock-up?" "No one mentioned an ownership audit," Sophie muttered, sliding into her seat. Mom didn't sit. She stared at the screen like it had glitched. Then her gaze swept the room. High-backed chairs, suited board members, glass walls that overlooked Manhattan like a fortress. She caught sight of Rachel standing silently at the far end, arms crossed. "Excuse me," Mom said. "We're here for a scheduled board discussion on Whitmore Holdings loan." The door behind them opened with the softest of clicks. The room fell silent. I stepped in. Not with fanfare, not with music, just presence. My heels didn't echo. I made sure of that. Let the room carry the weight. A man in a charcoal suit stood by the doorframe and nodded. "Good morning, Chairwoman." And just like that, the room rearranged itself around a truth they hadn't prepared for. I walked past them, past Ryan's confused frown, past Sophie's parted lips, past Mom's tight expression of dawning horror. I took my seat at the head of the table, a place I'd designed, long before I'd claimed it. "Let's discuss your loan," I said. It was like cutting ice. The boardroom's touchscreen flickered once, then displayed the formal agenda. 9 a.m., special review, loan request number, 78C. Applicant, Barbara Whitmore. Mom's eyes scanned the table, searching for rescue. "I wasn't informed you'd be present," she said. "You weren't," I replied. Ryan straightened. "Claire, if this is your idea of a power play..." I opened the file in front of me. One precise movement. The document fanned out with surgical clarity. Flagged lines, fraudulent entries, cross-referenced tax deferments, ghost assets, and one critical document. The Shell Corp registration dated a month before the loan. "This is your company's real standing," I said, laying each page out like evidence in a trial. "And this is what you tried to hide." Sophie leaned in. "What is this? Where did you get this?" Rachel pressed a button on the wall console. The screen behind me shifted again, showing the corporate pipeline, then revealing a second layer. Ownership stakes. Whitestone Tower Holdings, 57% majority control, Claire Whitmore. I thought this company was public, Ryan said quietly. It is, I said, but influence is private. Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence wasn't hers. It was mine. Years of it, folded and weaponized. I turned one more page. This is the revised audit from our internal compliance team. It includes the attempt to launder liabilities through a temporary shell entity using the Sagaponack property. She blinked once. Just once. That was all it took. According to Section 47B of the Whitestone Bylaws, I continued, any misrepresentation exceeding $1 million in declared value requires immediate board-level intervention, including a full hearing. No one spoke. I had imagined this moment 100 ways. The room, the looks, the words. But none of those versions felt like this. Not victorious, not vindictive. Just inevitable. I remembered her hand, how it gripped mine before the national math competition, how tightly she squeezed. Win, so I have something to be proud of, she said. Not for yourself. Never that. Now here we were. I folded my hands and looked straight at her. You called me a disappointment. I call this overdue interest. You expect me to sign this? Mom's voice cracked, clutching the restructuring agreement. I didn't flinch. You once said success had a price. I'm just collecting. The silence that followed wasn't surprise. It was pride, curdled and frozen. Her hands, usually graceful and exact, now trembled against the contract folder. She didn't sit. Not fully. Just hovered, as if the chair had suddenly betrayed her. I stayed still across from her, eyes locked. The room was much smaller than the boardroom. No marble, no views. Just 4 chairs, 1 long oak table, 2 glasses of untouched water, and a legal contract that had been revised 12 times by my counsel, and reviewed twice by state compliance. Rachel stood near the frosted glass wall. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her tablet glowed faintly, mirroring each page as Mom flipped through. Clause 1, termination of discretionary family allowances. Clause 2, installation of independent financial oversight. Clause 3, quarterly audits, including retroactive access to 5 fiscal years. Clause 4, all loan obligations remanded to Claire Whitmore as principal underwriter and restructuring authority. Mom's lips twitched. She reached the bottom of page 2, where her signature was flagged in red. I gave you everything, she said without looking up. No, I replied. You invested in Ryan and Sophie. You tried to make me invisible. Her eyes narrowed. You lived in this house. Ate at my table. I almost laughed. At the farthest seat, the one nobody looked at. She recoiled like the words burned. That's not true, she whispered. I wanted you to succeed. You wanted a reason to be admired, not a daughter, a trophy. The contract waited between us, heavier than it looked. You've made your point, she snapped. You're powerful now. You've won. Do you really need to humiliate me? This isn't humiliation, I said. It's compliance. She looked down at the clause again. Her hand hovered over the pen. You're my daughter, she said, her voice lower now, almost desperate. And I felt nothing. Exactly, I said, which means I know every one of your moves. There it was, the final truth. The line she'd used when I was 14 and wanted to switch math camps. The line she muttered when I placed second instead of first in statewide calculus. A Whitmore doesn't kneel, but today she would. I nodded once to Rachel. She stepped forward, placed the audit attachment beside the agreement. 3 slides, 1 document chain, and a metadata proof of tampering, each time stamped. Mom's shoulders slumped. The paper finally became real. I said nothing more. There was no need. She reached into her purse and pulled out a silver pen, the Mont Blanc I once tried to give her at graduation. She'd never used it, not until now. Her hand shook as she pressed the tip to the line. Rachel's tablet pinged once. Timestamp logged. I stood slowly. Notarize it, I whispered to Rachel. It's done. Ryan Whitmore, named partner at Lexington and Hill. I flipped the folder open. Embezzled $340,000 from client escrow accounts over 8 months. Ryan didn't speak right away. He leaned back in the leather chair across from me, arms folded too tight, jaw clenched just enough to betray fear. This room wasn't for performance. No sweeping windows, no boardroom drama. Just thick walls, legal-grade silence, and 2 water bottles untouched in the center of the table. Rachel sat in the corner, tablet on her lap. She hadn't blinked once since we entered. Ryan finally exhaled. So this is what we're doing now? I'm not doing anything, Ryan. The numbers are quotation marks. He gave a hollow laugh. Escrow mismanagement? That's your angle? Escrow theft. You charged late-night wire fees to a charity client's account. 217 times. We pulled the timestamps. You were in Atlantic City each night. Rachel swiped her screen. The image projected cleanly onto the monitor. Credit card trails, IP logs, entry records to the Bishop's Vault Casino, all matched. You hacked my cards? I tilted my head. Number I filed a compliance check. You're still listed as a dormant trustee on 3 of our umbrella accounts. His silence said he didn't remember. That made it worse. You came here to reconcile? I asked. He stiffened. To negotiate. I nodded. Then here are your options. I slid a new folder across. He didn't open it. 1. You accept internal disciplinary measures, sign a resignation from the Trust Oversight Board, and take a temporary post in Singapore. He didn't move. 2. I forward this to the Manhattan Bar Association, with copies to the DA. His voice cracked slightly. You think you're a judge and jury now? No, I said. I think I've read every clause of the law you tried to bend. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. You were never supposed to be this powerful. I folded my hands. You said I wasn't built for this. I decided to prove you wrong. Quietly. He stopped at the edge of the table. His fingers hovered above the envelope like it might bite him. This is a vendetta, he muttered. This is accountability. He sat down again, breathing shallow. Rachel tapped something. The printer in the corner hummed, spitting out a flight itinerary. I arranged the logistics, I added. Departure Thursday. Corporate apartment near the Raffles office. You'll be their new compliance instructor. It's what you're qualified for. Ryan blinked. You know Singapore doesn't even have blackjack? I smiled lightly. Exactly. She didn't knock, just stood there outside my penthouse door holding a bottle of Bordeaux. No words, just eyes that didn't accuse. For once. I opened the door without speaking. The hallway was quiet. Even the elevator hum had disappeared, as if the building itself didn't want to interfere. Mom stepped in slowly, holding the bottle like it weighed more than it used to. The lights in the penthouse were low, just the city casting reflections against the glass walls, tall, sharp buildings outlined in a sea of evening gold. I walked ahead of her, not offering to take her coat. She didn't offer it either. She set the bottle down on the marble counter, watching me. How long? She asked. Have you been hiding this? I didn't look up from the drawer I was opening. Since last August, I said. That's when I crossed 51%. The corkscrew clicked into place. Her eyes narrowed. You waited all this time? I poured the wine. I was waiting for the right moment and the right silence. She ran her hand along the countertop, not wiping, just tracing the grain like she needed something to hold on to. Was this about hurting me? She asked. Was that the goal? I held her gaze for a long second. I've been doing it for years, I said. trying, failing, adjusting. She didn't interrupt. Then one day, I continued, I stopped trying to make you proud. That's when things started working. Her chin dipped slightly. I always thought you'd grow out of this dramatic streak. I half laughed. You mean the one where I run a bank? Silence again. Not the awkward kind, just thick enough to cut. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small folded paper. Worn, soft at the edges. She laid it between us. I found it last week, she said. The original is probably with you. This is just the copy. My fingers didn't reach for it. I recognized it anyway. My father's will. I buried it, she said. Her voice wasn't apologizing, but it wasn't defensive either. I thought you'd waste it. I know, I said. She took her glass but didn't drink, just held it. You remind me of him when you talk like that. I raised my own glass. He taught me silence before he taught me numbers. We stood like that. Two shadows surrounded by glass, reflections, and something that wasn't peace but wasn't war either. I poured 2 glasses of Bordeaux. You called me a disappointment, Mom. Turns out I was just a late return on investment. They clinked glasses, no smiles. But for once, no need to be defensive. I didn't set out to break them. Not at first. All I ever wanted was to be heard. Not outshout anyone, just to exist in a space where my voice didn't echo back emptiness. But when silence becomes the default, you learn to weaponize it. Over the years, I studied everything they used to ignore me. The reports, the networks, the language of legacy. I learned not just how the money flowed, but how the power danced behind closed doors. I waited, not because I was weak, but because I was precise. I let them talk, let them laugh, let them dismiss. And I wrote it all down, like ledger entries in my memory. The moment they walked into that boardroom, still thinking I was a girl in the library stacks, I knew I had won. Not through revenge, but through relentless preparation. Not by raising my voice, but by owning the floor they walked on. Every signature they mocked me for lacking, I now demanded. Every deal they shut me out of, I reviewed. And when my mother sat across from me, trembling with the pen she once used to write checks with my name erased, I didn't flinch. I didn't gloat. I simply handed her the paper. And the silence she returned it with was all the acknowledgement I needed. My brother looked smaller in the light of evidence. My sister, quiet for once, stared at her phone like it could reverse the decisions I had just made. But none of them could take back the years I had turned into equity. This was no performance. This was closure. 2 weeks later, when she came to my door with a bottle of Bordeaux, she didn't ask for forgiveness. And I didn't offer it. What passed between us wasn't peace, but an understanding. The kind that grows only after fire strips a house down to its frame. I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I listened. Long enough to learn, to adapt, to rise. I didn't need their apology. I just needed them to see who they had underestimated. Let them drink the wine. Let them remember the moment everything changed. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. Of voice, of worth, of identity. Because when injustice is met with unwavering patience and precision, even the deepest wounds can become weapons of truth. Power, when rooted in silence and sharpened by memory, cuts deeper than rage ever could. She was once called a disappointment. Now, her name signs the contracts that decide futures. No empire built on denial can survive a daughter who remembers. And if you've ever sat at the far end of the table, quiet, forgotten, told you weren't enough, but chose to build anyway, to learn in silence, to wait until the moment was yours, I want to say, thank you for listening to this story. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making anyone kneel. It was about reclaiming a voice that had been counted out long before it had the chance to speak. I know some of you watching right now might be carrying that same silence. The kind that doesn't show up in loud arguments or slam doors, but in smaller things. The seat no one offers, the question no one asks, the pride no one expresses. I see you. And you're not alone. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been made to feel invisible by the very people meant to stand beside you, I invite you to leave a comment below, share your story, or simply say, I'm here. Because sometimes that's all it takes to remind yourself you still matter. Thank you for spending your time here with me today. For pausing whatever noise is in your own life to listen, reflect, and maybe carry forward a little bit of quiet strength. Your presence here means more than you know. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, about family, resilience, justice, and quiet victories, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Until next time, stay patient, stay sharp, and remember, even the quietest voice can change everything when it speaks at the right moment. Thank you.